16 mushrooms. Almost every one of them is hiding something. Shiitake. Dried shiitake smells faintly of garlic and sulfur, and no other mushroom does that. The compound responsible, lenthionine, only forms when the mushroom dries, so fresh shiitake tastes far milder than dried. It's the world's second most cultivated mushroom, prized for its meaty texture, and its caps hold up in broths, while the tougher stems go into stock. Song Dynasty records from 1,000 years ago describe Chinese farmers growing shiitake on felled hardwood logs. Japan later refined the technique using oak and chestnut, and by the Ming Dynasty, emperors reserved the mushroom for the royal table, earning it the nickname the emperor's food. Today it grows on sterilized sawdust blocks instead of logs, cutting harvest time from years to months. Oyster. Oyster mushrooms are named for their shape, but the stranger fact is what they eat. They secrete a toxin that paralyzes microscopic worms called nematodes, then grow hyphae into the worm's body to digest it for nitrogen. One of the few mushrooms that's genuinely carnivorous. Cultivated worldwide today, they're mild and delicate, working well in stir-fries and soups since they take on other flavors easily. First cultivation began in Germany during World War I, when food shortages pushed growers to farm mushrooms on straw and sawdust instead of importing food. The technique spread slowly until researchers in the 1970s worked out how to grow it cheaply on agricultural waste, and it's now the third most cultivated mushroom on Earth, after button and shiitake. King oyster. King oyster mushrooms barely resemble their oyster cousins. Instead of growing in shelf-like clusters on tree bark, they grow alone from the roots of desert plants like sea holly and giant fennel, producing one thick, ivory stem topped with a small brown cap. That dense stem is why chefs use king oysters as a scallop substitute, searing thick-cut rounds until they caramelize. Native to the dry grasslands of the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Central Asia, king oysters stayed a local wild food for most of history, with the earliest written mentions only reaching back to the late 1800s. Large-scale cultivation only began in the last few decades, once growers in Japan, Korea, and China figured out how to farm it on sterilized substrate instead of digging up wild roots. Porcini. Porcini means little piglets in Italian, a nod to their plump, stocky shape when young. Unlike supermarket mushrooms, porcini can't be farmed. They grow attached to the roots of living pine, oak, and chestnut trees, trading sugar for minerals in a partnership no grower has replicated indoors. That's why porcini are almost always sold dried, since fresh ones exist for only a few weeks a year in the wild. Foragers have hunted porcini across European forests for centuries, and fresh ones still fetch far more than common cultivated mushrooms during the short autumn season. The same underground partnership that makes porcini so prized is also why they've never been farmed, tying the mushroom permanently to wild forest instead of a warehouse. Chanterelle. Chanterelles smell like apricots before they taste like anything. That aroma comes from a mushroom that doesn't even have true gills. Instead, blunt, forking ridges run down the stem, which is how foragers tell real chanterelles from the poisonous false chanterelle growing nearby. Like porcini, chanterelles partner with tree roots and have never been farmed, so everyone sold is foraged wild. Golden chanterelles have been picked across European and North American forests for centuries. In France, they're still called girolles and treated as a seasonal delicacy each summer and autumn. DNA testing recently found that what foragers long called one species is actually more than 20 closely related types worldwide, each tied to its own forest and host trees. Morel. Morels can lie dormant underground for up to 50 years, then explode out of the soil the spring after a wildfire burns through. Scientists still aren't sure why fire triggers such a massive fruiting, though changes in soil chemistry and a sudden flush of nutrients from the ash are the leading theories. The honeycombed cap is hollow all the way through the stem, which is how foragers tell a true morel from the toxic false morel, whose stem is packed with cottony tissue. Morels have barely changed in 100 million years, yet they've resisted large-scale cultivation for just as long. Foragers still supply nearly the entire market, hunting them each spring in a multi-million-dollar wild harvest, with burn morel hunters heading into scorched western forests within weeks of a wildfire dying out. Enoki. Grocery store. Enoki look nothing like the wild mushroom they come from. Wild enoki have short, velvety brown stems and small orange caps. Farmers grow the white version in sealed, dark containers, which tricks the mushroom into stretching desperately toward light that never comes, producing the long, pale shape sold in stores. The two taste almost identical despite looking like separate species. Wild enoki has been eaten across Europe, Asia, and North America for centuries. under names like velvet foot, for the dark, fuzzy texture at the base of the stem. In 2018, DNA testing revealed the Asian strain grown for food is actually a separate species from the European wild one. So supermarket enoki isn't technically the mushroom mycologists had studied for 2 centuries. Maitake. Maitake means dancing mushroom in Japanese, and legend says the name comes from people literally dancing with joy when they found one in the forest. Japanese folklore even claims nobles once traded it for its weight in silver, since wild maitake was so rare. The mushroom grows in heavy, overlapping clusters at the base of oak trees, sometimes weighing over 40 pounds, looking more like a ruffled hen than a typical mushroom. Hence its other name, hen of the woods. It's been used in Chinese and Japanese medicine for centuries, prized long before Western science took interest in its compounds. Research today focuses on its beta-glucans, natural sugars that appear to interact with the immune system, though most evidence so far comes from lab and animal studies rather than confirmed results in people. Lion's mane. Lion's mane doesn't look like a mushroom at all. Instead of a cap and gills, it grows as a single ball of cascading white spines that can hang several inches, like a frozen waterfall. In China, it's called hutu gu, or monkey head mushroom, for the same shaggy resemblance. Cooked, it has a tender, seafood-like texture that chefs often compare to crab or lobster. Used in Chinese medicine for over 1,000 years to treat digestive complaints, lion's mane has recently drawn scientific attention for compounds called hericenones and iridescenes, shown to stimulate nerve growth factor in lab studies. Early animal research suggests these compounds can cross into the brain and support nerve repair, but robust human trials remain limited, so claims about memory or cognition benefits in people are still unproven. Black truffle. Black truffles smell like a male pig's hormone, which is why female pigs used to be the tool of choice for hunting them. Farmers have mostly switched to trained dogs, since pigs that find a truffle often try to eat it before anyone can stop them. The truffle grows entirely underground in partnership with oak and hazelnut roots, giving off its aroma specifically to lure animals into digging it up and spreading its spores. Named after France's Périgord region, black truffles have been part of European cooking since at least the 18th century, when they became a fixture of aristocratic tables. Italian mycologist Carlo Vittadini formally described the species in 1831. Prices today still run into the thousands of euros per kilogram, depending on the season's harvest and the truffle's size. White truffle. White truffles have never been successfully farmed, which is the main reason one sold for over $300,000 at a 2007 auction. Unlike black truffles, which some growers cultivate on inoculated tree roots, the white truffle's underground partnership with oak, poplar, and hazel has proven impossible to replicate outside the wild soils of northern Italy. Its aroma is sharper and more garlicky than black truffle, so it's shaved raw over hot food instead of cooked. An Italian doctor named Vittorio Pico first classified the species in 1788, naming it tuber magnatum, Latin for of the lords, after the wealthy buyers who could afford it. The town of Alba in Piedmont built an autumn festival, an annual auction around the harvest, and it remains the reference point for white truffle pricing worldwide. Wood ear. Wood ear's scientific name comes from a legend that Judas Iscariot hanged himself from an elder tree, the same tree this rubbery, ear-shaped fungus grows on. Medieval Europeans called it Judas's ear, later corrupted into the unfortunate name Jew's ear, before it settled on jelly ear or wood ear today. The mushroom itself is nearly flavorless, prized instead for a crunchy, gelatinous texture that survives even hours in a simmering soup. Chinese farmers were cultivating wood ear on hardwood logs as early as the Tang Dynasty, around 600 AD, making it the first mushroom ever deliberately farmed by humans, roughly 1,000 years before French growers worked out how to cultivate the common button mushroom. It remains a staple of hot and sour soup and mapo tofu today, and China still produces most of the world's supply. Chicken of the woods. Chicken of the woods tastes so much like poultry that foragers use it as a straightforward meat substitute. Despite growing in bright orange shelves on tree trunks rather than anywhere near a farm, the world's heaviest recorded edible mushroom was a single specimen of this species, found in England's New Forest in 1990, weighing just over 100 pounds. Only the tender young edges are worth eating. Older growth turns woody and inedible. The fungus is also a serious tree pathogen, causing a brown rot that can hollow out and eventually collapse old oaks from the inside. What mycologists long called one species turned out, after DNA testing in 2001, to be at least 3 distinct species across North America, some of which cause stomach upset, so foragers need to know exactly which one they've found. Beech, shimeji. Beach mushrooms are bitter and faintly toxic raw, but cooking flips the flavor entirely into something nutty and savory, so they're never sold or eaten uncooked. The white version in stores isn't a separate type. It's a UV-induced mutant of the ordinary brown beach mushroom, bred purely for its paler look. What's often labeled hon shimeji, or true shimeji, in shops usually isn't the real thing. The genuine wild species can't be farmed, so growers substitute this easier look-alike instead. Japan began commercial cultivation of beach mushrooms in the 1970s, and it quickly overtook oyster mushrooms as the country's most consumed specialty mushroom. Grown in tight, clustered bunches on sawdust blocks rather than logs, it remains one of the easiest mushrooms to mass produce, which is why it now appears in supermarkets well beyond Japan. Straw mushroom. Young straw mushrooms look almost exactly like the deadly death cap in its earliest stage. Both start as a small white egg wrapped in a papery veil before the true mushroom breaks through. Straw mushrooms are harvested and eaten at that exact egg stage since it's when they're most tender. But foragers who don't know the difference have mistaken deadly amanita eggs for the safe version. Cooked, the flavor is mild and slightly musky, more a background note than a bold flavor of its own. Buddhist monks at the Nanhua Temple in southern China were growing straw mushrooms on fermented rice paddy waste by the 18th century, formally recorded by 1822. It's now the third most cultivated mushroom on Earth, with a growth cycle as short as 2 weeks from spore to harvest, far faster than nearly any other variety. Reishi. Reishi is too hard and bitter to eat as food. The flesh is closer to wood than mushroom, so it's simmered for hours into tea or extract instead of cooked and served. In Chinese, it's called lingji, meaning spirit mushroom, or mushroom of immortality, a name that stuck because wild specimens were so rare that finding one felt miraculous. For nearly 2,000 years, Chinese emperors reserved it for the imperial court, and it appears throughout Taoist art as a symbol of long life. The earliest written descriptions date to around 200 AD in a medical text called the Shennong Ben Kiao Jing, which ranked it among the highest class of tonics. Modern research has isolated hundreds of compounds from reishi, including polysaccharides studied for immune effects, but the immortality claim itself remains folklore, rather than anything science has confirmed.